Suzanne Jackson, you've been a very busy woman. Besides an artist, you've been an actress, a dancer, and toured internationally with the Pacific Ballet, a writer, a professor at the Savannah, Georgia, College of Art and Design. When you got to LA, were you going to be an artist or a dancer or both?
Well, I tried to find a good ballet company because the company I had studied with and was learning with in San Francisco, Alan Howard was the director, and he had been with Ballet Russe de Monte Carlo. He knew people from the Kirov Ballet and the Bolshoi, and when the New York City Ballet would come to San Francisco to rehearse, they wouldn't stop at San Francisco Ballet, they would actually rehearse at Pacific Ballet, and we would be able to sit in on classes or even take some classes and they were incredible dancers. And I remember seeing Arthur Mitchell and another tiny dancer rehearsing for Aegon. I was sitting this close to them. So that when I came here and especially coming out of South America, and we were paid very well because we were touring out of the country, and I thought, well, I can dance and I can paint here. And then living in Echo Park, and everybody's heard me say this, there was a guy named Malcolm Lubliner who was a photographer. Malcolm would come through, tell us about things, and then he said I should take a class from Charles White at Otis. Everyone was taking classes from Charles White in town.
Talk a little about that, because he was obviously a most remarkable person.
He was. Charles White was the first instructor that I had who taught to us. He'd come around and comment about your drawing, because at San Francisco State we had some really well-known people who are famous now, instructors, but they would come in at the beginning of the term, the middle, the end, and we all kind of worked with each other, just painting and drawing. You know, we were in studio, so what do you do but paint and draw? And Charles White talked with us. He also told us stories about how he studied at Chicago Art Institute, and I think he was there, I could be mistaken, but I think the three artists were Jacob Lawrence, Charles White, and Critchlow. They were there, and one would buy books, one would have the brushes, and the other would have maybe the drawing supplies. And so they arranged their classes so that each one, when one got out of class, they could switch the supplies or the books and get through, because he said they were just so broke and so poor. And he also told us a story about how he got a job cooking for this woman, and he didn't know how to cook. So he would call his mother long distance to get the recipes. And the woman was really pleased with the way he was cooking, but then she got her telephone bill and it was really huge. And she wanted to know, what in the world, Charles, what are you doing? So he told us those kind of stories, which were really very encouraging about just the survival as an artist.
Was it difficult as a woman artist to get recognized and break in to the, good old boys network?
I have been thoroughly naive all the way through from the time I was, left Alaska and came down. When I, by accident, opened up the gallery, Gallery 32, all I knew when I came to Los Angeles was that I was supposed to get a studio space. And I didn't really know anyone here. I didn't know the art scene or anything. I'm still curious about how. I just came because I had a few friends, and it was a good way to get away from home. I actually met quite a few people because of theater and opening the gallery space up for those artists who wanted to use my studio. And as a result of that, then began to meet people. And then I think it was maybe the third or fourth show, Dan Conchular had an exhibition, and at the same time, Noreen Sulmeyer, who used the name Noreen Stone, was writing an article about artists in Los Angeles, and she'd come through to interview me. But then she also visited Joan Ancrum at Ancrum Gallery, and so in that interim, Bernie introduced me to Joan Ancrum and Bill Shalley, and they liked my work and were very supportive. And I think it was, and we were really spoiled by that gallery because they insisted that we make quality work, we didn't show too much, and that they just supported that our prices were not too high, that collectors owned the work, and then as people owned the work would be shown. The thing that people don't realize is that when a collection goes to a museum and a collector gives the work, that collector really donates but has no power. So not all of those works were actually being shown in the museum, and not many women. They may have put up a Catlett and maybe an Alma Thomas, but the work was mostly men's work in the Hirshhorn. So I found out that one of my collectors wanted to buy that painting, and I think I must have called, or I don't know whether Joan Ankrum encouraged it or what, but I said, well, I'm going to call them and find out if they're hanging my painting, and if they aren't, then I want them to send it back. I don't want it to be in the basement. We were all a little bit, you know, we were trying to be politically active, you know, in a sense, and also to take a stand, because in a way, people take advantage of artists, and then they also come and exploit. And I was not aware of any of these things. I didn't know that artists were separated by gender or color when I came. I just knew I was going to be an artist, because where I came from in Alaska, my teachers, my parents, the community actually supported. If you were doing things very well and you were hard at it, then people just really encouraged you very much. So I had no clue that, you know, that you were separated. If you were an artist of color, that you were put into these categories. I had no idea of that. I really didn't. And it just never occurred to me, I guess, until I came here, and then I met the artists, and when we all started talking, we'd have these late night talks, the Black Arts Council and John Otterbridge and John Riddle, and then seeing the struggle that Charles White was having, because they had never exhibited his work here in the LA County. That was the first thing that everybody was sort of fighting for. Charles White should have an exhibition at the museum.
Let's go back to the Gallery 32, which was in a space that you had taken as a studio to work in. How did it become a gallery?
I lived in a motel with a dog and the cat, with an Afghan and a cat, for I don't remember how long, but I was asking the people in my class about studio spaces, and they looked at me blankly, you know, like, what are you talking about? And I thought that was really curious. And then I found these beautiful buildings on Lafayette Park Place, which had all this beautiful ironwork and balconies, and it had this rickety elevator and a beautiful pond, and I thought, this is ideal. And then the studio was number 32, so I thought, this is perfect. This is what I want. It's in a lovely place, because I like places that are beautiful. But then when Timothy Washington and David Hammonds and some of them came around, they saw the space, they said, oh, you should make a gallery. This has to be a gallery space. You should let us have exhibits in here. And I said, I don't want to do that. This is my studio. But as it turned out, I had a friend in San Francisco who was in school with me, a painter, and he had a friend in Santa Barbara, Gordon Dipple, who was a jewelry maker. And so the first exhibition was Gordon Dipple and David Swanson and Timothy Washington. And I have a letter from David saying, I hope you're not going to open one of those black art galleries. And I'm thinking, what is that? I don't even know what that is. What is a black art gallery? I knew there was the Black Man's Gallery in San Francisco, but it was this tiny little place that was kind of a, craft place. So I didn't make that connection. I just, it's going to be a gallery, but it's my studio. And we printed up a card, but I handwrote all of the invitations. I still do that because people respond, they came. And we had a very good opening. The space was so beautiful because it had big plank floors and really simple exhibition. And Timothy, of course, the artist knew people, so they could invite people to come. And then the next exhibition, I didn't know what I was going to do, so I invited George Evans and Annie Bianucci, who were other students in painting class at Otis, and then I showed some watercolors.
Were you the first gallery to show David Hammonds?
He showed the doors that were just recently at the Pompidou Center. That's where that door was first shown, because David would just walk in with work. In the middle of the exhibition opening, he'd walk in with a new work and hang it on the wall, take something down, put it up. And during that time that he had the exhibition at Gallery 32, he won first place at the Municipal Gallery exhibition that was up at Barnsdall Park.
Yeah, that was an annual thing, yeah.
So we extended the exhibition and we put the body print that had the American flag wrapped around it. That was one of the first American flag series. And I also have a Polaroid of one of the first body prints that David had made, and I think he may have made it right there on the floor in the gallery. So I really think that that was probably his first solo exhibition at Gallery 32.
At one time during your gallery, time it was open, didn't you have a very controversial exhibition?
There were a couple.
Was that Emory Douglas?
Yes, actually Elizabeth's exhibition, because it was about oppressed people of the world, and she used a quote from Melina Mercouri, who was going through the struggle in Greece at the time, on her brochure, and we received bomb threats and calls while we were hanging the show. There were two women in there, and it was really kind of scary in a way, hanging her exhibition, which was really drawings, but some of the people had rifles. And then after her exhibition, the Panthers contacted me.
This is the Black Panthers.
Yes, because they wanted to do an exhibition to raise money for the children's breakfast program. And they had, I think it was basically that, but they were working with children. Once it was up, and it was very peaceful, and I think it was just very short, but the police stopped people from coming in, tried to stop them out in the street. And people came in anyway. And then the Panthers wanted me to, said I should turn over the gallery to them, and they could really do something with it. And I said no, because basically this way people, middle-class people, all kinds of people can come in, and they can see what it is you're doing and make a decision on their own. But the police really tried to stop people. And then we were going through that time when there were what we called infiltrators of the infiltrators. So there was one...
Go into that, because that was fascinating. To find that out, which I never knew, which most people don't know.
There were people who were posing as artists or posing as guests coming in, who actually
worked for the FBI?
Yeah, and one guy actually, we wondered how he could have all these expensive cameras, because he was really poor looking. He showed up everywhere. They finally have exposed him, and there's a name that goes with him that if you talk with some other artists, it may even be written down now, that yes, he did admit that he was sort of spying. Mm-hmm.
And then also to find out that this same guy, when he was working for the FBI, set the Watts Writers Workshop on fire and burned it to the ground.
Yes, that's the one.
And that workshop was the one that was founded and run by Bud Schulberg,
exactly.
The famous writer.
And Elizabeth Lee Taylor had connections with Bud Schulberg, because she had written a play, which was Cinderella Brown.
Yeah.
So there were all these people, and it was incredible because we were all interacting, and everybody knew one another or had worked with one another at one time.
Makes me again suspicious of the U.S. government.
Yeah, well, I also had the FBI come in because a young man who was a baby when my parents first moved to San Francisco, and they lived across the hallway from us. And he'd come down because he knew Gordon had a show, and he found out it was at a gallery that I owned, and we hadn't seen each other in years. And he came through, and then the FBI came through later looking for him because he was a conscientious objector. And I was saying, I don't know where he is. I just know he came into the gallery once. I haven't seen him since. I can't give you information. Then the IRS came through and wanted to tax me for all the artwork that was on the wall. And I had to say, until the artwork is sold, it has no value. It has value that is aesthetic, but I have to sell it first before I can pay taxes on it.
But you also had other artists curate, like Betty Saar and the Sapphire Show?
Yes, and that was because the Carnation Company had come through and chosen a number of artists for an exhibition, and I think one woman artist may have been chosen, and I'm not even sure that Betty was chosen for that exhibition. So we said, this is really crazy. Not only are they not showing, most of the galleries are not showing artists of color, they're not showing women. So we got together. It was Sanga Nangudi and Eileen Abdul Rashid and Yvonne Colmeo, trying to think who else, Gloria Bohannon. I'm not sure if there was any other woman in that, but we decided we'd have a women's exhibition together, and we called it, and there's, they call feisty black women Sapphire.
Well, that was a character on a radio.
It was. Sapphire was the wife of in Amos and Andy.
Amos and Andy,
yeah.
right.
So you call someone a Sapphire when she's a diva. She's just too much. And so we titled it Sapphire, You've Come a Long Way, Baby. And we had the pictures, all of our baby pictures on the poster. And I'm hoping Betty still has that poster somewhere. And that was our exhibition, which was really quite good. Because basically they might show one or two of us with one or two works in a group exhibition, but we weren't really highlighted. And then as a result of that, Betty Saar was invited to curate an exhibition called Black Mirror at the Women's Building, which was out in Venice at that time. And we had a discussion evening, and in that discussion evening, the black male artist showed up, and the only other male artist there was the projectionist, tall white guy who ran the projector, who wasn't terribly interested in any of the discussion. So we were saying, you know, the women from the women's building were saying, well, all you guys have shown up. You know, why is it that you're here? Well, I never forget this. They said, basically, there were so few of us that we just supported each other. It didn't matter whether we were male or female. It was just a matter of trying to support, you know, the women as artists.
Were you ever stopped by the cops?
Yes, I was, eventually. Toward the end of the gallery, when I was getting ready to close it, there was an artist from Europe, black artist who came from Europe, who had a studio in a house in Hancock Park, and we knew that we were not supposed to be in Beverly Hills past 10 o'clock. So
Why not?
anyone who was of color was supposed to get home and not be in Beverly Hills. And this guy wanted everybody there the day before his opening to help him finish painting. And he wore a cape, I can't remember his name, and a beret, and he was flying around like a Batman in this place, and we were just laughing because the artwork didn't seem that great. Anyway, we all got into the van to get ready to go home.
At the hearse, you mean?
At the hearse, yeah. And it was David, and actually I was married then, so it was my husband, and I was also pregnant. And I had the dog, and we drove down, I don't remember, one of those streets going east and west to get to Gallery 32. The police stopped us as soon as we pulled up in front of Lafayette Park Place, and I guess they felt this was their opportunity since they couldn't get me for the Panthers or any of those other things. And they said I had parking tickets and that I had to go to jail. So at that time, Angela Davis was in jail, the Manson women were in jail, and everybody was at Civil Brand. A lot of young Panther kids, you know, it was old people. I remember there was an old elderly woman, and she and her husband were stopped because they'd had a television set in the back of their car, and they were accused of stealing it. And this woman was in jail. So I was in this strange time, and Sybil Brand was supposed to be 2 women to a room.
That was the Sybil Brand prison.
Yes, the jail, the city
Yeah.
jail. And there were 3 and 4 women in a room. And I had to sleep on the floor under the bunk bed. And I think I had 35 cents in change. And in the middle of the night, this other woman came who was supposed to be a young Panther and tried to steal my change. I felt this strange thing, and she was trying to steal my change. So it was a very interesting experience, which I, of course, could not tell my parents about. You know, I think I might have been 2 months pregnant or something, and so I'm thinking, okay, I'm in jail with my baby. And I think when it took them 8 hours to book me, and David Hammonds went around everywhere, and I think Ruth Waddy donated $6, and he had a hard time, you know, at midnight trying to knock on people's doors to get me out. It was supposed to be $46 to get me out. By the time they booked me, it went up to $80. And we were moving out of the gallery, you know, I was moving with my husband and all of this, and I just said, let me sit here for the weekend, I'll just stay. And it was really fascinating learning what was going on and what this whole system was, and the people who were in jail and the kind of characters. And one woman who thought the entertainer Johnny Taylor was going to get her out because she knew him, and she kept saying he was going to get her out of jail and all of this. A young girl, must have been 14. She was underage, really. So it was interesting to see this whole social structure of, you know, in this, but it was just, they were just putting everybody in jail at that time.
You were appointed by Governor Jerry Brown of the state of California to the California Arts Council. When was that, and what were those experiences like? You probably didn't have time for any work, because that's demanding.
somewhere along the way, got a phone call in the morning might have been from Jacques Borzaghi, who was one of the people on the staff for Jerry Brown, saying, we'd like you to be on the California Arts Commission, and the governor has appointed you, and you've got to go. And there was Brock Peters, who was the only artist, and he'd appointed me with Loudon Matthew and Gary Snyder. We kind of called to their attention, there are other arts out there that need support. So they gave, I think there was $30,000 left over, maybe a little more, and they gave asked each of us, the four of us who were artists, to find a group, an arts group that we felt deserved funding. Brock Peters chose the poets from Watts, the Watts poets. Loudon, I think, found an older artist who used an instrument that was really rare, that was like, he was like a living treasure. I chose a women's house in San Francisco, a girls' house, that could benefit from an arts program to sustain these young women to learn something, so when they left the house they could do something else. And I forget what Gary Snyder chose, but they were so successful that it helped the Arts Commission people realize that within different areas of the state there are different kinds of things going on, and that there are people making art who are not just the symphony and the ballet. So they were totally supportive. And Mrs. Amundsen, I just came to really respect her a great deal. I really, because she was flexible and open to ideas. We were expected to be there through the whole term of Jerry Brown. I finally had to leave, I think in my 7th year, whatever it was, second term, because I was broke, and I think I divorced, and I wasn't making as much art. It was really hard to make art. And it was easier, for example, the actors, Peter Coyote, they're exposed. The theater people continue on and do what they have to do. So Jerry Brown was a little upset that I left and didn't stay for the whole term. Noah Purifoy wanted to maintain what we had done. We actually divided the state into bioregions, so that each state, if you're from the middle of California, you're farmland, and it's not the same as being from Los Angeles. San Francisco is different. Eureka is different. So we were trying to pay attention to all the aspects that were more relative to parts of the state, so that you weren't forcing. Maybe the symphony and the ballet is more important in Los Angeles, or in San Francisco. But when you're out in the farmlands, there's some other kind of community arts. We also moved around and tried to meet around the state. And that way we got to know, and we were also hosted by the different,
Is that still the way they operate?
I visited a meeting, and Noah was still there, trying to hold on to the Arts Council that we had established, which was really wonderful. But every time a new governor comes in, they throw everything out.
I know.
And I'm thinking, what are they doing? They're reinventing the wheel. They've gone back to what we were doing before, and why not keep a continuity?
No, because it's not theirs if it's continuity,
But it has to do with the artists who are out at large. It has to do with the constituency. Of course not. Of course not. And that's how I always try to be so careful now that I'm older, because it's too easy to become involved in you get excited, cranky and involved.
Cranky.
I'm very cranky, and I'm with students who have no sense of history, that I've been teaching these years.
And they don't care about it.
And they, it's like, oh, what is that?
Yeah.
So what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Suzanne, thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
It's been
Thank
a
you.
really interesting time, and I've had a wonderful time.
Well, so have I. Thank you.
Thanks.